I'll tell you, people in this town love seeing pretty photos of grandiose stadiums, don't they? Good morning. Happy Wednesday. It's a hump day. It is great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Social media in this town exploded last night because some group that I admit I don't know, I'm not familiar with, I'm not aware the Chiefs and the Royals have ever heard of, put out renderings of a Chiefs stadium out by the Speedway and the Legends. And my goodness, people were going nuts. Mark's sending it to me. Mark was here monitoring our severe weather last night across Kansas City, and thankfully some of those storms did die down once they got to the Kansas City Metro. But, man, I mean, I was like, Mark, hold your horses there, big guy. He was getting a little too excited for me.
I saw that, too, and I thought his church lady would say, how convenient. You know? What,
yes.
This whole drawing, I just had this laying around.
Yeah, that's right. This thing just happened to be here. So, for context, here's what's important to note about these stadium renderings, that if you haven't seen them, they're up on the KCMO Talk Radio Twitter page. They're not on my Twitter page because I'm still locked out of my Twitter or X. But I will say I'm getting closer to hopefully getting it back one day at a time. I'll tell you that story later this morning. But for any context, this is simply an idea that has been floated out there of what a stadium in Kansas for the Chiefs would look like. The Chiefs have not been involved in any of that development concept. None whatsoever. And you got to realize that nowadays with AI technology, if you know what you're doing and you're some like whiz kid with AI, you can whip that together in like 15 minutes. Like, I know it looks amazing, and you can see the photos for yourself, like I said, on our KCMO Talk Radio X account. And did you put them on Facebook by chance, Mark? Let's pop those on Facebook. What do you
I'm
say?
putting them up right now.
Mark's putting them up on the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page. I'll share them to my page as well. They look awesome, don't get me wrong. They really do. But just because somebody put together renderings doesn't mean anything. Now, where did this go last night? This talk of these star bonds that have gotten all the attention in the Kansas legislature. As of this morning, nothing's happening. They never got to it last night when it came to the renderings, when it came to the idea of potentially using star bonds to try to entice the Chiefs to potentially, and the Royals, but the Chiefs, to potentially make a move over to the Kansas side of the state line. They did not get anything done on this since they're closing up the legislative session here in the next few days. They basically ran out of time. That's what happened. The legislature adjourned without taking up the star bond proposal, which was really meant to lure the Chiefs or the Royals to the state of Kansas. Now, they could try again in January, but once again, we're talking about a year from now. And one thing that Clark Hunt made pretty clear in his press conference over the weekend is that he had to move, and he had to move fairly quickly. So there is no opportunity right now to go to Kansas and use these star bonds. And what are these star bonds? Once again, it's basically a way to pay off the bonds using sales tax monies. It's not increasing the sales tax and then giving that money directly to the teams. It's paying off the bonds that the state may issue for the teams to build a new stadium using sales tax dollars in the area of the stadium and where it's built. That's basically what it is. Sean Tarwater was on the show yesterday. He is the head of the Commerce Committee to talk about that and explain that. And if you want the full explainer of these star bonds, that is up on the KCMO Talk Radio podcast page.
It almost feels like a use tax without saying.
You can call it that, yes. Now, whether or not it's good public policy remains to be seen, because the argument would be, hey, sales tax dollars that should be going to schools, should be going to, fund programs for the poor, are instead going to fund stadiums. That's the argument. But, of course, it doesn't matter right now. It's a moot point because the legislature adjourned last night without taking up this star bond proposal. So the lawmakers may try again next year. But in the meantime, The Chiefs and the Royals are basically where they were. They got rejected by the voters of Jackson County. So now the question is, what is their next move? What might the state of Missouri end up doing? Well, Governor Mike Parson was in Kansas City yesterday for a little ribbon cutting. And, of course, people had to ask him, and they wanted to ask him about the Chiefs and the fact that there was interest, of course, on the other side of the state line. And here's what Mike Parson had to say.
What will you do to respond to what they're doing over there?
Yeah, I know it's a question of responding to what Kansas does, but look, we're going to do everything we can to keep the Royals, Kansas City Chiefs, in the state of Missouri. Now, what that looks like at the end of the day, I don't know, but look, they're a long-time part of who we are in Missouri, and, you know, it's like any other thing. We're going to be competitive.
All right, that was Mike Parson really saying, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do something. I'm going to, like dealing with my toddlers. I run out of things to punish them with, so don't do it again or I'm going to do something. Yeah, you just watch. Yeah. You watch. You wait what's next. All right, Dad, whatever, loser. That's what it feels like because there's really no tool in Missouri's toolbox right now. Their legislative session is also wrapping up. They're not doling out monies for the Royals or the Chiefs in their budget. There's nothing to suggest that that's going to happen. They don't have this star bond thing that the state of Kansas uses. So, I don't even know what that means. I know the governor wants to keep them there desperately, especially the Chiefs. He's a diehard Chiefs fan, but I know it's important for him to keep both teams there. So what does he do? I don't know. I mean, to me right now, it just sounds like a lot of talk. But in the end, the Royals and the Chiefs are going to have to figure out what's in their best interests. I still think it makes all the sense in the world for the Chiefs to stay where they are. And if they put a sales tax on the ballot that is just for them in Jackson County, I believe it passes. The reason it failed last month is because the Royals' plans, let's be honest, got a lot of blowback. And even if you loved the Royals' plans, let's also be honest, it was not well handled by everybody involved. So if the Royals still want to be downtown, the word is they might be able to get their downtown ballpark without having anything go to the taxpayer. The city is apparently working on some kind of deal around that right now, according to multiple reports. We'll ask the mayor about it tomorrow morning at 7:30. So if the Royals can get their downtown ballpark by cutting a deal with the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and the Chiefs can stay at Truman Sports Complex by getting some sales tax monies from Jackson County, you could even lower the sales tax. How about this? Right now, or what was most recently asked for, was the 3/8 cent sales tax, right? For both teams to share. If the Royals get their downtown ballpark, the Chiefs could say, can we get a 1/4 cent sales tax, less than 3/8 of a cent, on the ballot, get a 1/4 cent sales tax to make upgrades to Arrowhead Stadium that exclusively goes to the Chiefs. Now, whether or not you think that's good business is a separate story, but they could come back to the public with that if the Royals can figure out their downtown deal with the city exclusively, and then boom, you've got both teams still in city limits and still on the Missouri side. But I don't see what the state can possibly do at this point, John.
Imagine the spinning possibilities on that. You're saving money on your tax, right?
Exactly. That's the pitch.
You're getting more for less.
That's the pitch.
It could be.
And you know what? I think it would pass with flying colors if the Chiefs are the only ones on there. No doubt in my mind. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, it is there's a lot happening in the overnight hours, notably on the Kansas side of the state line that I want to get to here. They did pass another bipartisan tax plan on the Kansas side of the state line. We'll get to that, plus the latest crazy happening on the college campuses here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. I woke up to two interesting things today at about 4 o'clock. One was my wife doing cartwheels in the bedroom because Charlotte slept until 4 a.m., went down a little before 8 last night and got all the way to 4. So we're pretty fired up 8+ weeks in. So I saw her at 4 o'clock, and then she was in with Charlotte. And I said, how's it going in there? Was that wake up number 2? And she's like, no, it was number 1. This was great. I'm like, okay, good for you. And then I also woke up to a text from our buddy Dave Traubert over at the Kansas Policy Institute. He usually joins us on Tuesdays, and he was all excited too. So I had two very happy people in my life right out of the gates for very different reasons. Dave Traubert texted me at 12:15 in the morning saying, another tax bill passed tonight. So what happened here is the Kansas legislature, late into the evening, passed a bipartisan tax plan to reduce taxes. Now, this plan is basically the same plan that Governor Kelly vetoed. It eliminates state income tax on Social Security benefits, cuts property taxes, eliminates the state sales tax on food starting July 1, and it simplifies and lowers income taxes. It's essentially identical to the plan that Governor Kelly vetoed. However, without getting too far into the weeds, Governor Kelly thought that this plan that was originally passed was a little too risky. That I think she claimed that this plan that was originally passed would cost the state $450 million in revenue, and she didn't want a plan that cost more than like $433 million in revenue. Or literally, she didn't want to go above 433. This went to 450. We're splitting hairs here. But this thing passed late last night on a bipartisan basis. Basically the same plan, but more in line with what Governor Kelly is willing to hopefully sign. She better sign it. If Governor Kelly does not sign this, one, it will be, most importantly, bad for the state of Kansas. Kansans are looking for relief. Whether you're a senior citizen and you're looking to just not pay taxes on your Social Security, and Kansas is one of 6 or 7 states that still taxes at the state level Social Security. It's just such dumb policy to tax Social Security at the state level. They're looking for a little bit of property tax relief. It's not going to be a lot because most of your property taxes go to your city, your county, and your schools. But, every little bit helps. And then the state sales tax elimination on food, July 1, that would be great, just in time for your July 4th, bash. And then simplifying and lowering income taxes is always a win. It's minuscule, but that's a win for Kansas. Kansas is not nearly as tax-friendly of a state as people across the country perceive it to be. They figure, hey, red state in the middle of America must have a great tax climate. It really doesn't. Now, Nebraska doesn't either, but Texas does. Oklahoma's pretty good. Missouri's better than Kansas when it comes to the tax climate. So this would get the state of Kansas more in line, or at least closer to some of those other states. That would be a great thing. But now we just kind of sit here and we wait to find out what exactly Governor Kelly is going to do with this bill. If she truly is middle of the road, if she truly is as bipartisan as she claims to be, then she will sign this, no ifs, ands, or buts. But if not, then she will veto it, have some lame excuse, and hopefully the people of Kansas will see through this charade. I've tried to get her on the show. She's been on the show a couple of times this year. Something tells me it's going to be a tough nut to get her on the show this week. But I also had a tough time getting on Governor Parson. We asked him to come on today, and he couldn't make it work. So I get it. Everybody's busy. But come on now. We're trying to, get people answers here that they deserve. In the meantime, speaking of things that happened overnight, well, finally, it was about time, right? They made some of these arrests at Columbia University in New York City, where these bums had been taking over Hamilton Hall on campus for the better part of 48 hours, give or take. And finally, the police cleared the building. Took them a while, but there were dozens of arrests. They cleared out this anti-Israel mob, and they finally did what they should have done in the first place, which is not allow the inmates to run the asylum, because that's what's been happening on many of these college campuses. So overnight, they cleared out Hamilton Hall. They made these arrests, and Columbia issued a statement 15 minutes after the cops entered campus last night saying it regretted having to rely on police to clear the mess. This apology for arresting these people is exactly how you end up in this situation, Columbia. The administration said after the university learned overnight that Hamilton Hall had been occupied, vandalized, and blockaded, we were left with no choice. We didn't want to arrest you guys, but you gave us no choice. We tried to beg you to come out, but you wouldn't come out. Columbia Public Safety personnel were forced out of the building, and a member of our facilities team was threatened. We will not risk the safety of our community or the potential for further escalation. NYPD then swiftly moved onto the campus's south lawn, cleared out the student protesters at the mini Tent City, and also got the students out of Hamilton Hall. In total, about 100 protesters were arrested in the mass sweep, and here's part of what it sounded like. There's got to be a part of the New York City police that just enjoyed kind of, slapping around these goobers a little bit. Come on. It's okay, New York City cops. I know you guys enjoyed it. Just a little bit. I mean, it was like Soy Boy Central. Well, I don't even know what – I couldn't – if you were to put a gun to my head and ask me the genders of all these people getting arrested, I guess I got a 50-50 shot, but I wouldn't feel good about my odds because I can't tell who's who on some of these arrest videos. I don't know what's what anymore. It was a weird look all around.
They, thems, too. Don't forget.
True. Okay, fine. You get the they, thems, the non-binaries. Certainly not non-binary, but non-binaries, to say the least. But I don't know what's what anymore. I have no idea.
I wouldn't apologize for arresting agitators. There were people that weren't students.
Exactly. Yes, a lot of them were not students.
You shouldn't apologize in the first place, to your point.
I'm just blown away by the amount of people wearing masks. Like,
oh, right.
They're clearly wearing masks to hide their identity. But they're wearing the COVID masks, so we let them get away with it, right? As if they're somehow acting in the name of public safety. They're storming buildings and causing chaos on prominent university campuses. They're not public safety advocates. They're thugs. They're agitators. But they wear a COVID mask, and we just, allow it. But if we wore a ski mask, it'd be like, whoa, what's going on there? If they put on a white hood, like they were part of the Klan, we'd freak out. But they are basically Klansmen, just from the left side of the aisle. That's what they are.
Well, again, appropriate use of the word thug in the broadest sense of the term anyway.
Well, they are. Yes, right. You're right. There's no doubt about it. They are. Unbelievable. So hopefully this is starting to clear up on some of these college campuses. But it's really been beyond concerning to watch this unfold over the last few days. It has. And if you haven't seen this, a university in the Midwest took it one step further. They cut a deal with anti-Israel students, and it's one of the most insane deals that you will ever see. I cannot believe they acquiesced like this. I'll share it with you next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Let's go up to Chicago here. I mean, we know we've got some of these anti-Israel protests happening at UMKC, but pretty weak, comparatively speaking. I mean, there's a couple of performance actors who think they're hot shots here in Kansas City, grifters and things like that showing up to these protests at UMKC. But it's really just, a couple dozen people without anything else to do, so they show up and look for some social media clicks. But in the meantime, up at Northwestern, after 5 days of anti-Israel demonstrators occupying Deering Meadow on Northwestern University's campus, the Northwestern leadership, led by President Michael Schill, isn't that an appropriate name for that hack, huh? Michael Schill is literally the president of Northwestern. Boy, he is a shill for all the wrong things, it seems. They decided to, acquiesce to several of the protesters' demands. You're not going to believe this. Okay, so this is from National Review. And because of all the crazy at Columbia, stuff like this at Northwestern in Chicago is getting overlooked. Most notable among the concessions is a promise to offer full-ride scholarships to Palestinian students and guarantee faculty jobs for Palestinian academics. Are you kidding me?
I'm getting pissed now.
This is insane. The document that was agreed to by the university with the student demands reads as follows. The university will support visiting Palestinian faculty and students at risk, funding 2 faculty per year for 2 years, and providing full cost of attendance for 5 Palestinian undergrads to attend Northwestern for the duration of their undergraduate careers. The university commits to fundraise to sustain this program beyond this current commitment. Northwestern is also going to provide a house for Muslim students and will advise employers not to rescind job offers for students engaging in speech protected by the First Amendment. This is unbelievable. First off, they're hiring people based on nothing more than their background, and they're giving scholarships to students based on nothing more than their skin color, their background, their likely religion. That's what they're doing. Everything that is anti-American. I'm pretty confident it's also illegal to literally admit that you are giving people jobs based on what they are, not who they are. And then you also are creating a situation where you're giving them free housing simply because they're Muslim. This is at one of the most prominent universities, and not just the country, but certainly here in the Midwest, probably top 3 in the Midwest, right? Northwestern, maybe you throw in Notre Dame, Wash U's probably up there. And that's what they're doing. Just here in the last 24 hours, this got announced. I mean, you can't make it up. And they're also going to tell employers, hey, if these kids were at all involved in these anti-Israel protests, give them a job anyway. You know, they're just engaging in speech protected by the First Amendment. You think Northwestern would do that for a bunch of skinheads? Something tells me they wouldn't. And by the way, they shouldn't. An employer should be allowed to decide for themselves whether or not they want to hire somebody who is sympathetic to Hamas or sympathetic to the Klan. You know, both are reprehensible, but frankly, an employer should make that decision. And the fact that a university would go out of its way to suggest to employers, hey, you know, these kids, they're just exercising their free speech. What is it about, you know, when the far left does something nuts, it's free speech, right? It's like their American right. But then, you know, people on the right do something that, you know, also is not something you want to be doing. Take January 6th, for example. There's nothing about that that's admirable. There's nothing about that day that we should want to go back to. But it's interesting how 3+ years later, that becomes this insane threat to democracy that still gets talked about every day by one political party. But now you look at a world where, whether it's the 2020 riots and protests to now today with these college campuses, that's just First Amendment rights, man. That's just all about free speech. What's wrong with you? You should know better. No, that's not how this works. It's really become America's new mob rule, is what it is. You go back to 2020, that was the most recent, clearest example where the left used that murder of George Floyd to trigger and then really condone riots in major American cities. Looting and vandalism was justified as this social justice rage. Kamala Harris was tweeting out bail funds for protesters who were arrested in Minnesota. And you had a crime spree from San Francisco to New York and every major city in between, including in part here, Kansas City. Now, Kansas City had a bad few days, but we did not suffer in the ways that, you know, San Francisco or New York did. But we have dealt with record homicides the last couple of years. And while there's not a direct correlation there, I still think there's enough of a correlation because you have a lot of cops who said, screw this, I'm out. They retire, and they have a tough time bringing new cops in, John.
Memo to the right, your free speech is subject to fact checkers.
Yeah.
Right.
And on the left, not so much.
Not so much at all.
Not so much. They did the same thing with, Occupy Wall Street going back 10, 11 years ago now. So it's just fascinating how media treat these people. We don't know any of the agitators, right? Like there's not a single agitator at Columbia or Northwestern who's gone viral. There isn't. But think back to January 6th. You got the guy with the horn helmet on. Like, we found out about a lot of the key players. Heck, the DOJ is still trying to arrest people who took selfies, for crying out loud. And this is in no way to defend people who broke the law at the Capitol on that day 3+ years ago. The point is to share and note the clear distinction in how media handles different situations, in how, the elites in culture on college campuses handle these situations. But it's clear as day. One is just, hey, free speech. The other is a threat to democracy. And it's just based on what cause you're getting behind. And by the way, I think this is very dangerous for the next several months. I don't think this is the end of it. The summer months are right around the corner. The election's coming up in November. And if you think, hey, once these college campus protests end, this thing's going to end, I don't think so. I don't. The left is far more organized when it comes to these kind of events than those on the right are. The political left is much more organized for mass protest and much more likely to take the streets. And all of this does not bode well for the country's political future, especially if Donald Trump wins in November. 913-408-7957. So these campus eruptions today, they may be aimed at U.S. policy in the Middle East, but to me, they're a symptom of what is a larger trend towards protesting in the streets and law breaking to achieve political goals. That's in large part what this is about. And by the way, political leaders and other leaders across every community in this country have a duty to call this out and enforce public order, whether these violators are on the left or on the right. 913-408-7957. Our buddy Scott Fawn from the Missouri Times is going to be here coming up at 7 o'clock on KCMO. Have you seen how the media's covered the Ralph Yarl lawsuit that we told you a lot about yesterday? It's just, gosh. Defund NPR! Defund NPR! Defund NPR! I will give you the most embarrassing headline on this lawsuit filed by the Ralph Yarl family against Andrew Lester and against the HOA up in the Northland next on KCMO 95.7 FM. Defund NPR! Defund NPR! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! NPR has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! NPR has got to go! How's that sound? I think I got something there. I could join these protests on college campuses. I think it would sound pretty good until they realized what they were chanting with me. And then they'd beat me up, and I don't know what would happen to me, but it wouldn't be good. I say that because KCUR here in town had the worst headline I've ever seen in my life on this story that broke a couple of days ago with Ralph Yarl. He's the teenager who was shot by Andrew Lester. Ralph Yarl was in the Northland last year in April, was supposed to go pick up his brother, and he went to the wrong home. He went to the home of Andrew Lester, old man in his 80s, living by himself. Wife recently passed away. Gets all flustered. It's 9, 10 o'clock at night, and he ends up shooting Ralph Yarl in the head. Now, Ralph Yarl, amazingly, thank goodness, is alive. But it's just, the whole thing is just tragic. And we're still trying to figure out what happened. There was a criminal trial, or there is a criminal trial that is going on right now. What we believe happened is Ralph Yarl showed up to the door, and, he thought he was at the right house. He was looking for his kid brother. What exactly he did at that front door is unknown. Now, none of this, unless there's something we don't know, but none of this, is in any way intended to give credence to what Andrew Lester did. Andrew Lester clearly was an old guy off his rocker. Now, he's flustered, fine, but that doesn't excuse you just opening up fire on somebody on the other side of the door. That's inexcusable. But still, we don't know what exactly happened yet because the criminal trial is still ongoing. So here's the headline from KCUR yesterday after it came out that Ralph Yarl's family is suing Andrew Lester civilly and is also suing the Homeowners Association in one of the most insane lawsuits I've seen here locally, at least in my life. The headline from KCUR is, Black Kansas City teen Ralph Yarl sues white man who shot him for ringing the doorbell. That's the KCUR headline. By the way, nobody loves pointing out skin color and race like uber woke lefties. They just love it. They are so race obsessed. All they see Ralph Yarl as is a young black boy. They don't see him as just like Ralph. They don't see him as a young man in the Northland. They just see him as a young black boy who fits their political narrative, and they see Andrew Lester as this perceived old white racist who also fits their political narrative. That's all they see. They don't see these individuals as people. They see them as cogs that fit their narrative, that allow them to pursue their agenda. And by the way, we still don't have all the details as to what exactly happened at that front door. There are some allegations that maybe Yarl was, aggressively banging on the door, shaking the doorknob. We don't have all of that. And once again, that's not to excuse what Andrew Lester did at all. That's not my point here. But to have a headline like that, to make it so simplistic at KCUR, Black teen Ralph Yarl sues white man who shot him for ringing doorbell. I mean, that is so right in the wheelhouse of KCUR. I should have seen that coming. We all should have seen that coming. But it still is an utter embarrassment. Now, it's not as embarrassing as this lawsuit filed by Lee Merritt, the nationally known civil rights attorney, who's basically the, he's Benjamin Crump wannabe, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson.
Show some RESPICT.
Yeah, he's of that ilk, I guess you would say. He's the one who's filed this lawsuit against not just Andrew Lester, but the HOA. Now, I've got to reach out. I know some people who know people in the Homeowners Association that is being sued, Highland Acres Homes Association. And I have an HOA. I've been involved a little bit with the HOA and the attorneys, and I know how some of these guys operate, and they don't have the, shall we say, they don't have the backbones that I think they sometimes need in situations, but they try their best. The HOA, if I was a resident up there of this HOA in the Northland, Highland Acres Homes, I would demand that our HOA fight this thing tooth and nail. We are not going to spend our HOA dues on a case like this or use our insurance in a case like this. That would be insane. And by the way, if you guys pay this thing out, it is going to be, a field day for people who want to willy-nilly start suing HOAs. If you can sue an HOA, in the case of Ralph Yarl and Andrew Lester and that situation, what can't you sue an HOA for? Because the allegations here against the HOA is that basically they knew that Andrew Lester was an old racist and the HOA should have done something about it. That's basically what the lawsuit claims, which is just completely nuts. The lawsuit alleges the HOA was aware or should have been aware. So they don't even admit that they were aware. They should have been aware of Andrew Lester's propensity for violence and access to dangerous weapons and racial animus. So basically, if you are now part of an HOA and you're on that HOA board, you better start going around the neighborhood trying to figure out who has a propensity for violence. Hey, that guy once yelled at me at the pool. He might have a propensity for violence. Oh, and he's got a MAGA sign in his yard? Whoa, watch out.
He's a nut job.
Yeah, we better keep an eye on him, man. We better get him to sell his home. If not, he could be a liability for us one day. The lawsuit against the HOA also claims that the HOA failed to promulgate regulations sufficient to prevent its residents from firing a loaded weapon at a minor. Nobody can fire a weapon at anybody outside of self-defense. So what does that possibly even mean? The lawsuit also states here that the HOA allowed the existence of an atmosphere where Lester could shoot Jarl after he rang Lester's doorbell. I mean, this is so insanely stupid to any thinking person. I mean, honestly, anybody with half a brain should be insulted by this lawsuit. If you can set aside your bias for a second, you'll realize this lawsuit is nuts. And this HOA up in the Northland, they better have the backbone on behalf of just, decency in America and also every HOA in America to not settle. If they settle, it's not going to end well for HOAs across the country. And this case will be used against other HOAs as well. It's May. Worlds of Fun opening up on Saturday. And if you thought they were going to drop that chaperone policy, well, guess what? You had it wrong. Nope, they are keeping it. And by the way, they should be keeping it. So the chaperone policy is going to be in effect all day on weekends and weekdays starting 4 p.m. May 19th is when the policy will take effect from open to close on all weekdays and weekends. So that's going to begin in a couple of weeks. But, of course, they're opening up here on May the 4th, this Saturday. All guests 15 and younger must be accompanied by a chaperone who is at least 21 years old to be admitted to or remain in the park when the policy is in effect. Now, this policy first went into effect about a year ago after several fights involving over 100 teens, none of whom appeared to be accompanied by an adult. The brawls resulted in a sheriff's deputy being punched. So they changed that code of conduct and they updated their chaperone policy. And as far as we know, there were no real issues beyond some of that stuff early last year, right, fellas? There really wasn't anything that I can think of beyond some of the early season issues that they had back in 2023. I don't remember anything, at least.
I think it was just the opening day.
The opening weekend chaos, right? Mm-hmm. Where there was all the video footage of, literally 100-plus teens fighting each other and taking out their Snapchats and the whole thing. So I guess you can say it worked, John.
I'm not recalling any particular thing, but it seemed like there was more than one incident.
And I think that's what led to the chaperone policy early in the year. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, there were probably 2 or 3 situations.
I know Six Flags Mid-America in St. Louis has similar issues. I'm not sure if they have this chaperone policy, but they've had similar issues that Worlds of Fun's had with younger teens.
Yeah, I think they have as well. So now we sit here and we say, okay, we're opening up this year. I think that's great. And you know what? I think that this is a no-brainer policy that needs to be in effect. If you are dropping off teenagers at Worlds of Fun with no supervision, that's on you to figure out what to do with your kids. Worlds of Fun is not your babysitter, nor should it be. In fact, I think it's too young. I would say 16 or younger have to have a chaperone with them. I don't think 16-year-olds should be roaming around by themselves.
No, but at least at that age, you could have a license and could drive there yourself in theory and would be, in theory, again, responsible.
True. Maybe that's a case to be made for increasing the driving age from 16 to 17, as far as I'm concerned.
Is it 18 in New York?
It had been in the past. 17. So
we've always had the deal here with the agricultural that you can get the permit at like 15.
Yeah. And I get that for ag kids. There's no need. I'm sorry, but when it comes to kids in suburban or city limits, 16 years old, I mean, the maturity of teenagers is backtracking. Kids aren't getting more mature, they're getting less mature.
No, they're exposed to stuff that they're not able to really process. So while we think of, they take in more, they certainly take in more, but they don't absorb it.
They don't absorb it at all.
Than we would have in the past.
No way, no how. So that's coming to play this weekend, and they're keeping that in place. And by the way, they should be keeping that in place. In the meantime, in Kansas, this came down overnight, in case you missed it. They passed a tax bill at about 12:15 in the morning. This came down. And at 12:15 in the morning, the press release came out that the Kansas legislature passed a new bipartisan tax plan. Now, it's basically identical to the tax plan that passed a couple of weeks ago that Laura Kelly vetoed. It has the Social Security tax benefits, eliminating that at the state level. It cuts property taxes. It eliminates the state sales tax on food starting July 1, and it simplifies and lowers income tax. This is all stuff that Governor Kelly has, except for the income tax, advocated for. It passed the House the first time unanimously. It passed last night in both the House and the Senate. Now it goes to Laura Kelly's desk. And they basically just tweaked the original bill because, in her opinion, it cost too much. The original bill cost too much. It cost like $450 million a year in revenues, and she wanted it to cost about $430 million a year in revenues. So they tweaked it a little bit, and they're sending her now this new bill. Well, if she doesn't sign this, then I don't know how she can possibly call herself the middle-of-the-road governor anymore. I mean, she's gotten away with it for a long time, and it's worked, and it sounds good, and all these different things. But I don't know how she could possibly call herself that if she is going to, for the second time, veto a bill that saves every Kansan a little something on their taxes that was passed on a wildly bipartisan basis. But, frankly, nothing would surprise me anymore in Topeka. Now, speaking of the Chiefs, yesterday, a Jackson County judge heard testimony on the case of a 16-year-old boy who has been charged in connection with the Super Bowl rally shooting. The proceedings, which will resume later in May, could end in the boy being prosecuted as an adult. This comes from the Kansas City Star. The teen, referred to throughout Tuesday's proceedings by his initials AM, has been charged with 1 count of unlawful use of a weapon and 1 count of resisting arrest. Well, by the way, he should be charged as an adult. And if we're going to open up this Pandora's box, and I'm not sure, I don't like this road, I don't, but go back to Michigan a few weeks ago when you had the parents of a school shooter charged and convicted for basically, not doing their job as parents. If you're going to take that approach with a school shooter in the court of law, I don't like it, but why wouldn't you also take that approach with somebody who was involved in the Super Bowl parade shooting? Is that unreasonable? I'm not a fan of it, to be clear. But if that's going to be a new precedent, are we only going to do it in suburbs with school shooters when they get national attention? Or are we also going to do it in more urban settings when it comes to things like the Super Bowl parade shooting? Where are we going to draw the line between when parents are responsible for the actions of their children? So the Star writes here, the teen, state law lays out a group of factors for a judge to consider when reviewing whether to send a juvenile case to the general jurisdiction court, where the defendant would be prosecuted as an adult, including the seriousness of the alleged offense, whether it involved viciousness and violence, whether it was part of a pattern of offenses, as well as the child's age and history. AM, as he's referred to, and family members listened Tuesday afternoon as an attorney representing the Jackson County juvenile officer and the boy's own defense attorney presented testimony and evidence to Jackson County Family Court Administrative Judge Jennifer Phillips, who eventually will rule on how the case against AM will proceed. Now, one of the major issues that we have in Jackson County are the judges. The judges in the county are highly problematic. As much as we focus mostly on the incompetency of the prosecutor's office, and boy, they are. God knows they are. However, we also have a major issue with judges in this county just being soft on criminals. I don't know anything about this judge. I do not know anything about this judge's background. But, knowing what I know, just generally speaking about Jackson County judges, I'm not going to hold my breath that this judge or any judge is going to decide to charge this 16-year-old as an adult. But they should. If you want to send a message to criminals or would-be criminals in this county, you have to use the most prominent case in recent Kansas City history as a way to make a point and send a message. It's not only the right thing to do, it will save lives in the long run to send this message of we are not putting up with these thugs running around with their guns, acting like this is the OK Corral, like they are on the plaza and elsewhere. Those days are over. We're going to get serious about crime. We're going to crack down on these punks, and we're going to do something about them. And that's got to happen today because we have an issue, and it's not just in Kansas City, by the way. There is an issue around the nation of younger and younger people getting caught up in very violent crime. You got the 8 people involved. We don't know who they are yet. They haven't been arrested, but there are 8 people involved in the Plaza shooting a few weeks ago that all are under the age of 18. Did you see this story over the weekend? The NFL player Tank Dell, who was shot, I think that was Saturday down in Florida. I saw the suspect is also a teenager in that situation as well. Shot by like a 16-year-old. Christopher Bowie is his name. So we're seeing an increase in violent criminals who are younger than they've ever been. So you got to do something about it. One, you got to scare them enough to make sure they're not getting into a life of violent crime. Yes, there's proactive things that cities can do, but I think a lot of this ties back to, the COVID years. And I've talked about that ad nauseum, where suddenly, these people in these environments that were not stable home environments to begin with had no structure with school to go to in 2020 and 2021. They were out on their own. They were out on the streets. They were influenced by the wrong people. And now they're 16, they're 17, they're maybe 18, and they're living a life of crime. But it started when they were 12, 13, 14, and they were not going to school anymore. And maybe they had single-parent homes, 2 working-parent homes. I mean, it was one of the great mistakes. You want to talk about public health mistakes. Not only is it, Tony Fauci and his dopey face diaper and 6 feet of separation and, get the vax and you can't spread COVID anymore and can't get it. All those things were lies. But arguably the biggest mistake was potentially destroying future generations by telling them to not go to school and stay at home because we might save grandma. Dr. Phil did an outstanding interview with Ben Shapiro on this that came out on Monday. It aired here on KCMO at 2 o'clock. And Dr. Phil, Shawnee Mission North's Dr. Phil, talked about the millions of years of lives that we took off a generation with our COVID policy in this country. And it should never be forgotten because the kid in the urban core was always more likely to be impacted than the kid sitting in Blue Valley. But the loud, woke, dope voices in Blue Valley got most of the attention. And it's just completely ridiculous. And now, whether it's the Super Bowl parade shooting, whether it is the Plaza, whether it is the Tank Dell story, NFL player who was shot over the weekend, he's alive, he's okay. You're seeing more of these criminals under the age of 18. And I don't think we should be shocked by it.